Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering. We've got some fast-paced decks here. Not exactly combo decks. These are some aggro builds that can throw some serious punches. Life totals can shift very quickly. Of course, Death Shadow looking to intentionally change its life total. We have a Pithing Needle for Boros Ravager. Kind of an affinity brew that Tyler's been working on. And Grief, what I think will end up being the best card in the set. Obviously, cards like Ragavan are in the conversation, but I think the more powerful the format, the better Grief is. Of course, Unmask, a vintage playable card. Grief, for the most part, an upgrade to that, something that rarely happens. A card good enough to see play in vintage getting a better version. And Ravager taken with the Grief. And I would love to see a Death Shadow build running more Reanimates to be able to get Grief back out of the bin. For example, if that was a Reanimate instead of a Delver of Secrets, we could have the Grief on the battlefield and get, the Canonist, for example, out of there instead of having this turn 2 play. Delver not flipping. Urza's Saga on the battlefield, which is going to be a bit of a problem. Oh, Wasteland actually hitting that. I would have guessed that Pithing Needle would have been on Wasteland. I guess not. Oh, what else it would be choosing. Canonist is going to really hamper the situation. Oh, I got some catching up to do that. Wasteland. Now Steel Overseer. Nick taking a moment to read Brea's Apprentice. I don't blame him. The card does not see a ton of play. Not willing to trade Steel Overseer for an unflipped Delver. Counters being distributed from the Steel Overseer each turn. Everything's going to grow. The additional artifact creatures down the line also get that benefit. That Brea's Apprentice, for example. Able to make a 3/4 and a 2/2. Steel Overseer passes around those +1/+1 counters. And Murktide Regent. There's been very many instances, though. Yeah, just one. Just a 4/4. That is not ideal. Murktide holds things off. Delver still not flipping. That is brutal. Brutal. So, Aethersworn Cannon is going to get pretty big here. Now it's I believe, a 4/4. Arcbound Ravager. Force down to 6. Everything sends, has to block. And now the Murktide would actually just trade straight up. Not brainstorming. Interesting. I would have thought you could have brainstormed into like a Fatal Push to cast on Tyler's turn. Canonist is a problem, but you can play one spell on your turn, one spell on their turn. I don't know about that. I mean, it certainly wasn't a likely win, but there may have been more life there. I might be missing something. Let me know in the comments if I am. If you would have stuck around, played that brainstorm, found the Fatal Push and push Canonist. Then from there, all bets are off. Now you can be playing cantrips on the same turn as your removal spells. Really smooth things out. Now, granted, only 2 cards to begin with, which is kind of a concern for Death Shadow right now. These blue-black builds miss out on Expressive Iteration. Wonder if they'll actually take advantage of Night's Whisper. Card that hasn't seen much legacy play. We've been seeing the power of Expressive Iteration, having that incremental card advantage trading 1-for-1 cards like Wasteland or Thoughtseize or dazing your opponent's cards. And then you can also outdraw your opponent. You end up in a really good space. Night's Whisper could possibly be a 1 or 2 of. That would not surprise me at all. There's also that Battle for Zendikar, Painful Truths, I think it is. That one draws more cards depending on the number of colors that were spent to cast it. Something along those lines. I might be remembering the card a little inaccurately, but there are ways of trading life for cards. Has been for quite some time. Necropotent's really setting that precedence in the early days of Magic back in 95, I believe it was, with Necro. Nick's going to have the play. Probably just skipped over this amount of shuffling. Got a fetch into a Delver of Secrets, thanks to Watery Grave. That is going to be a shock and a fetch. So bolting himself, trying to get Death Shadow online as soon as possible. Death Shadow was thought to be dead after losing both Gataxian Probe and Deathrite Shaman, 2 key cards, but it came out of it as a black-blue build that may be better than the previous 3 color builds. It's a very efficient, brutal deck to play against. Has some tremendously strong matchups where your discard and your counter spells just make certain decks very uncomfortable, pestering them in pestering their hand, pestering the stack, just making it so they really can't resolve anything that they need to. And of course, those decks typically cannot challenge anything on the board, so a single Death Shadow can easily close the game out with no ability to chump block or buy any type of time, or take advantage of the low life that you have. I'm talking about decks like Sneak and Show, Lurin, just all sorts of different combo decks. Lurin might not be the worst because they do have all those Death Touch creatures, but a lot of combos are really going to struggle when you're talking about having your hand and the stack just mangled. And we've got a Dark Blast taking out Bomat Courier. Galvanic Blast cleared that Delver. Bomat Courier shows up, Hasty Body, and exiles some cards. Doesn't really get anything out of it, which is typically what I see with Bomat Courier. Very often it's just not worth losing your hand to get those cards back. Fatal Push also helping out. Now, I think the Gingerbread Man from Eldraine is actually being played in the deck as well, with that kind of double haste. Haste and can only be blocked by creatures with haste. Evasion haste. And here we go, Murktide, this one. Big as this. Just 2 this time around. Guy. Nephews gave me that. Or it was either Christmas or a birthday. It's nice. Goes up nicely on camera. Certainly makes an impact. They're like heavy stone dice. Bone Splitter not going to do anything on its own. Galvanic Blast takes out a Delver of Secrets. But this Murktide's still going strong. And is that a Chalice? From the outline, it kind of looks like a Chalice, but that card's pretty blown out. Daze, oh, it was a Canonist. Daze stopping the Canonist. 8 damage comes in. And Nick playing a untapped land, probably signaling that he has Pact of, or Force of Negation able to be cast. And that's going to do it. Force of Will, whole bunch of Force of Wills. Still got all these heading into game number 3. Nick's bounce back with Ravager not really doing very much that game. Heavily disrupted by the creature removal, Fatal Push and Dark Blast. Both a big problem. That can kind of be all in on stuff. When you have things like Bone Splitter and your creature gets removed, it's almost like removing 2 cards. I mean, sure, you can have another creature later, but in the meanwhile, while you don't, both cards are just dead. Really, the tempo loss can be devastating. Then when you're facing down a card like Dark Blast, which could potentially just take care of that creature again, be kind of hopeless. Dark Blast saw some play in Vintage for a while. Lava Dart used to as well. Nick showing that wasn't much of a decision. He's going to 6. He'll get the extra card from the draw, but he will be behind. Ravager's going to be on the play and is built to take advantage of that. I'll look to come out swinging. Sorry if Mike was unpleasant. Esper Sentinel. Dark Blast. Real Havoc Wreaker. Esper Sentinel. Potentially a bit of a draw engine. Also good at holding Bone Splitter. I suppose it's fine at holding Batterskull as well. Wasteland takes out the artifact land. Sentinel keeps swinging. Now Delver of Secrets. Ancient Tomb into something blown. Thinks about it for a second. Happy to swing into the Delver. And now Delver turning sideways. Fatal Push. Just an Ancient Tomb. Esper Sentinel. Tomb continues this bleeding for a Pithing Needle. That does not feel particularly strong situation. Really not much in Nick's deck that's affected by Pithing Needle. You'd almost expect that card to be sideboarded out. It is an artifact, but I mean, what are you naming? Fetches? Bomat Courier. Back and forth. Currently, Nick winning this race. Reef pitching Thoughtseize. Seeing a couple of Lodestone Golems. Those are beefy. Along with Canonist and another Esper Sentinel, but no white mana, just stuck on red. Death Shadow. Just a 2/2 right now. Tyler has the option of growing the Death Shadow by sending something into the fray. Any Nick's life loss going to kind of mirror the other side of the board, hence the shadow metaphor. We've got a Galvanic Blast. What does this even hit? Does not matter. It's just getting Force of Willed. Losing another point of life, growing the Death Shadow. And that Galvanic Blast, I presume, would have had to kill the Death Shadow as it's going to get so out of hand. But Delver's also a huge problem because it's just going to relentlessly attack. Esper Sentinel getting another card for Tyler as Ponder. Seems necessary to keep his game plan moving forward despite giving Tyler a chance to draw out of this situation. Wasteland on Ancient Tomb, setting Tyler back significantly from casting these Lodestone Golems. And we're in chump block territory for the Death Shadow. Anything that can stand in front of it. Mox Opal. Oh, and it looks like Lodestones would have started arriving. We got a Steel Overseer. And another Esper Sentinel. This gets dazed. And 3 more damage comes in the air. Esper Sentinel has to step in front of the Death Shadow. Tyler's dead to this Delver of Secrets. Well, Pyroblast, or Pyrite Spellbomb can at least avoid that, but this Death Shadow still looks like it's going to be lethal. Fetching end of turn. Got a Ponder. Finds a Fatal Push. Was there even a creature on board? I didn't even notice. Maybe that blown out card was a creature. But Death Shadow ends up taking it down as Nick digs his way towards that crucial Fatal Push, apparently. And showing some of the hate that came in. Null Rod. Devastating card. Ratchet Bomb also quite powerful versus Affinity. Nick was prepared despite Tyler having a pretty unorthodox deck.